Happy New Year's, and thank y'all all for tuning into a brand new episode and starting the year off fresh with us and positive vibes, maybe PVM Talk Show. We definitely appreciate y'all tuning in, tapping in. Hope you guys are in great spirits, enjoyed y'all New Year's weekend, turned up and enjoyed the holidays, safely but enjoyably. So tonight, guys, we're starting the year off with a bang. What a topic, what a guess to start the year off perfectly right. So we got fan favorite, show favorite, one of our personal favorites, Namadi, coming to join us today to have a discussion about mental health, particularly pertaining within the Black community. So guys, we're unpacking a lot today. Hope you drop in, share your gems as well. But before we get into all that, how was y'all New Year's Eve weekend? What did you guys do? What did you partake in? Did you guys go out? Because mine was rained in. So I spent the bulk of my day indoors behind closed shelter, but it was still enjoyable. Got to enjoy some time with my family, got to enjoy some good food, some amazing drinks, and got to, get the most relaxation I had in months. So, I got to enjoy myself, got to welcome in the new year as best as I could. So I hope you guys got to do the same as well. When my co-hosts for this episode jump in, we'll start this live up and start this conversation up. But until then, what are the vibes? What is the energy? Shout out my Eagles. Took that loss today. But playoff highs are still moving in the right direction. Not where we wanted to be, but, it's moving in a good direction. Also, to everybody that's starting them New Year's resolutions, what are those New Year's resolutions? And what are the resolutions that you think that you aren't going to keep going into New Year's? That's what I personally want to know. Every year, everyone has resolutions of what they want to do, but what are the ones that you think that you won't keep? Let's focus on that. I'm out of here. Let me send this invitation out to Jeide. He probably just didn't see that we went live yet, which is totally understandable. Ashley, let me go on that
Hey,
live. Hey, how you doing? Happy New
good.
Year's.
How are you?
I'm good. I like your hairdo. Loving the
Thank
braid.
you. Bringing in the new year as a fiery redhead.
I can dig that. New year, new style, new
Happy New Year.
hairdo. I know. Thank you. I appreciate that. How did you bring yours in?
Well, my surroundings are a little different. I'm home in upstate New York visiting family. I actually was supposed to drive home today, but I said I'd drive home tomorrow. But it's been nice. I've been here a few weeks because I'm still work from home. So got to spend time with the nephews who I love. They're 4 and 2, so they're right at that adorable stage. Yeah. So
They're adorable, annoying stage a little bit. I know all too well.
a little bit. But I mean, that's the perks of being the auntie, not the mom. Why I love the auntie life is that they're so fun for me because I only get them in like 3 to 4 hour bursts. And right as they get annoying, okay, time to go home to mom. Bye. Have fun. So I love it.
No, I understand it all too well. I understand it all too well. I went through that same phase with my nephew himself, so like I understand
How
the perks.
was your New Year's?
It was pretty good. I was rained in, so I spent the bulk of the day inside. Got to go to the gym though. Got to go to the gym, do a little shopping. But for the most part, just spent time with my nephew, spent time with my mom, my sister, watched some movies, uh, had some good food, some good drinks, got the chance
Hmm.
to relax, unwind. That was the big thing, just getting a chance to relax and unwind, really,
Yeah.
and just kind of just not focusing on doing anything, just that, just
Yeah. No, and that's important. I mean, and we'll get more into the topic of like mental health and stuff, but a lot of us have so much on our plates that when we're resting, we're so busy like feeling guilty about not doing other stuff that we're not actually resting. Like that's been a huge thing for me is like making active time to rest, because I find like a lot of times I'll wait until I'm so exhausted I have to rest, I can't go on, and then I spend that time trying to get my energy, or spend that time feeling bad about the work I should be doing, so I'm not fully resting. So now I make time to like actively rest, like I'm not doing shit, I'm just resting, and then it's restorative. Hey, Daddy.
Jeide,
Hey, Jeide.
what's going on? Happy New Year. Happy New Year, Dash. What's
Happy
going
New
on?
How
Year.
you feeling?
I'm chilling, man. I'm good, man. You know what I mean? Brought in the New Year smooth, you know what I'm saying, with family. We got some good food, good eats, got some rest before I got to go back into work around 6 o'clock tomorrow, but it's all good.
Yeah, that's all good. It's just the life. It's just the life.
You know what I mean?
That's
How are
good though. I'm
y'all?
glad you get. Oh, good. In good spirits. Same thing like you said. Good food, good drinks. Work tomorrow, but it's the life. Like I'm blessed to see a new year, just like we all are, and we're gonna make the most of it.
Yeah.
Right on, right
Like
Well,
on.
speaking of the new year, do either of you have any like traditions or what's it called, superstitions that you bring in the new year? Like I was reading a list of people who are like, you have to open a window, you have to have black-eyed peas, you have to do this. Like, do you guys follow any of
I
those?
didn't even
mm,
know those things existed.
existed. I know, really. Same here, but I do go out my way. I don't know if this is superstition or this is just paranoia, but like when the fireworks start, I do make sure like I'm in a nice position away from the noise, where like I can hear it.
Yeah.
So like maybe that's about the only tradition I have. And then this year, like I actually let my nephew see some of the fireworks for the first time. Normally, like when they go off in the neighborhood, I just keep them away from the windows, but this year I just kind of put him in a space where he could see like them exploding in the sky, but he was far enough away where he couldn't see people actually lighting them up. So I mean,
Yeah.
that's about
That
it.
sounds
Yeah,
cool. Yeah. Yeah, I don't really have any, except for like we definitely clean before the New Year's, like the whole don't go into a new year with like a messy home, but we don't really subscribe to any of the other, it's like the black eyed peas. I read that having money in your wallet is good for having money through the year. I don't know. I'm not a big superstitious
mm,
person overall, so I kind of take all of that with a grain of salt anyway.
Yeah, I didn't
okay.
even know that was a thing, honestly. I'm not a superstitious person myself, but I didn't even know that was a thing. I think the only thing I thought I knew about regarding New Year's was like the resolutions. That was as far as the
Yeah.
New Year's thing would go,
Yeah.
as far as like my knowledge was concerned. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, they're more like black, like predominantly like black New Year superstitions for going into the new year.
Mm,
Now, how much
okay,
money
interesting.
should you have in your wallet for that money one? Because I got a nice little 10 note up in the wallet, like.
You got something? Well, that should be good. I'm hoping, because I never ever have cash because I'm a card person, but I have like a 20 in my wallet just randomly. So I'm like, maybe that's a sign. Maybe this is the year the money will come rolling in, because I'm actually starting it with some money. We'll see. We'll see.
But here's the thing, because you see, this is where myths get outdated, or you know what I mean, we gotta really challenge them. If you got a card and you got money in the bank, don't you still got money in your wallet?
That's true.
Ooh,
That's
yeah, that's
true.
that's deep. That's deep, Jenny.
Hey, deep man, I ain't trying to hear that
Yeah.
shit. It ain't deep. It's called economics.
Though knowing me, I probably started the other year with no money in the bank either. So maybe this is still the first year I'm rolling in with money. We'll see.
Oh
Dig on it.
man.
Dig on it.
But going back to what you said, Namadi, about like when you need when rest requires you, when your body requires you to take a rest, like I do feel like a lot of people, and I don't even think it's a black thing, but I do feel like a lot of people that deal with mental illness or even just deal with stress or anxieties in general, they get to a point where that's the case. As you was talking, like I can remember, like that's been the case for me throughout my life for the most part. Like I'm just kind of getting to a place where I'm noticing when it's happening. I'm noticing like when I'm overworking myself, or like when I'm not giving myself the proper amount of rest. Like before it's hitting my body, before like my body crashes on its own. I'm kind of noticing in a little bit where I'm able to a certain extent be able to be like, all right, you know what, I gotta make some time to rest, or all right, I gotta take some time to rest.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, that's kind of been like one of my resolutions for the new year to be mindful of, was like be mindful of like at time I need to rest, and honestly kind of trying to put myself in a position where it's not something I need to be so mindful of, but just be a part of my daily schedule where that rest
Mm-hmm.
is like kind of built into my schedule, where it's not something I had to think about. It's already something that's pre-programmed, so it's just like a way of life. So hopefully by the end of the year, like that'll be something like that's a part of a regular habit of my daily routine. But right now that is something I'm like working to try to improve on. Just because I keep seeing and I keep hearing all these stories from like older guys, like and like for me personally, I always seen like the older men in my life always have like a little hiccup to their walk, or a little step where it's just like you could see like their labor and pain, and I don't want to be in that type of position like when I'm older, so I kind of want to give myself that rest now, not really wear myself out or tax my body out now, but still, maximize what I can maximize at the same point. So I'm like trying to waver that line. But what you said, that really just jumped out to me. Like, but go ahead and retake over where you left off at.
Oh no, I mean I think I agree with you. Like you really have to pencil it in, and I think a lot of us we are so like first of all we live in such a capitalist society that it's all about what you can produce. So we're taught to either work like crazy with your work regular schedule, right? Like whatever it is you're doing, work, 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 or we're taught to grind, grind, grind if you want to be better, and nobody really puts in there that you need like the time to rest to restore. And I know that like when especially because I'm a creative person, a lot of my stuff comes from me creating things. If I'm tired, I'm not able to, like my ideas don't generate the way they should. It takes me longer to do stuff, and I'll find if I force myself to rest, like, oh, all of a sudden that idea or that name I couldn't come up with before, now I have it, or that thing I was trying to visualize, like there it is. And it's really because like my body and my mind needed time to recharge because a lot of stuff, especially when we talk about mental health, we talk about it in terms of how we feel. And I'm constantly trying to remind people that those feelings are attached to an organ, which is your brain. So like anything, whether we're talking about like resting or depression, anxiety, it's all attached to an organ. So the way we remember that other organs need like nutrients and rest and all those things, so does your brain for it to function properly for you to feel things the way you're supposed to.
Mm, that's
That's so
real.
true.
Now, do either of you have New Year's resolutions? You mentioned resolution. You're going to work on resting more. Do you have either like a resolution or like a theme? Like I've kind of gone away from resolutions, just more so like having like themes or focus for each year.
Um, yeah, I guess I do. They're more so like goals and check marks I want to hit off individually and like professionally speaking. Um, I got check marks for like flying out that I want to reach. I got check marks for like my personal life as far as like my biggest goal being I want to be a homeowner by the end of the year. Like that's real big for me. Honestly, ownership in general, like as far as like real estate, the business, all of it. I that's a priority for me to just kind of be self-sufficient, self-owned, self-generating everything. So as far as like with the business, I just hope to be in a position like either where I have like a place set up in store, like to kind of open up, fly them out in 2024, or like have like a situation instead where I can like consistently serve out of that building or that space, like to, get my name and venture out to cooking even more, Um,
Mhm.
and it's really just depending on where life takes me, where certain situations place me, if I can get certain deals, and just being patient and being mindful of like what's out there and what's open to me, and not falling victim to the pressures of, oh, this is available now, so let me take that you know, and settling for that and just kind
Yeah.
of being patient and just being like, you know what, like this may be a great opportunity, but let me see if it's a better opportunity, you know, and just kind of, you know, like, you know, being mindful of my decisions that I go forward, you know. So like that's also a big thing, you know. It's really just a process of being better overall, you know, this year. Like using all my lessons that I've learned thus far, my experiences, good and bad, pin them, you know, pin them, pin them to use, you know, like, and just trying to make the most of my decision making, you know, and hopefully my decision making is good, and it isn't flawed, you know, but we'll see, you know, like, you know, like gotta leap, you know, gotta spread your wings to fly. So like, we're gonna see.
Yep.
Like,
Nice, nice.
Right
it's
on.
gonna be the year to see that. So, you know, I'm betting on me this year. Like, so that's the motto this year. You know, like
Betting on
whatever
you.
it is.
I like that.
Yeah. That's what it
What about you,
is.
Daddy?
You know.
I I guess the major thing for me this year would be to be more mindful and purposeful with my money. You know, more saving. You know, more research into the places where my money will go. I mean, it's very little I could do as far as, you know what I'm saying, like the sustenance, you know, like shopping, you know, things for your foods, things for, you know, households and all that. Like, it is what it is as far as that. I'm talking about putting money in places where it'll generate ROI. You know what I'm saying? Like a return on investment, you know. So I just want to start off at a foundation in which, you know, everything that I do with my funds will allow me to understand how to make more funds or to understand industries and businesses, more intimately, you know.
Yeah,
Mm.
nice,
How
nice.
about yourself, Namani?
Um, I actually just finally officially came up with mine last night. So my main theme for the year is the pursuit of happiness.
Okay.
But like the way that I really want to break it down though is to um, pursue like more long-term foundational happiness, because I think like a lot of times, especially for me, like I will give up something that I want long term because of something that I am enjoying in the moment, or something that, or like I don't want to be uncomfortable in the moment, or I don't want to do this, even though I know that if I did that like long term, I would be happier. So for me, it's all about like switching that mindset. So like, you know, like your goal is to own a house. Like my goal is to get debt free again. I did it a couple years ago. It felt amazing. So I want to do that again. But shopping also feels amazing. I love me some retail therapy. But if I remember my, but if I remember my pursuit of happiness, being debt free feels a lot happier to me than whatever the temporary happiness of shopping is. So I got to put that aside to get to that happiness I want down the road. Or like I love traveling all the time and I love being really active. But right now, like working out and doing all that stuff is like, I don't want to. But I know that if I get over the hump of whatever I don't want to do, then I'll be able to get back to the spot of like my long-term happiness. So that's the mindset I'm trying to go in with everything, especially because, you know, there's a lot of things where even like we'll tell ourselves like, I don't really want to do that. But once you start doing it, it's not that bad and it's not that awful. It's just that we naturally don't like being uncomfortable. Like our mind is
Mm-hmm.
literally programmed to protect us from being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I love Mel Robbins' 5 second rule, which is basically that like whenever you have to do something, you just count down from 5 and then you go. Like you stop thinking about it. You stop giving yourself the choice to do it. And I've used
Okay.
it in the past to like get myself to become an early riser. So I want to get back to doing that. Get myself to working out. Like you just literally have to make the decision and then take the choice out of your hands.
Mm.
Like you're like, I've decided this is what I'm doing. Now I'm counting to 5 and I'm doing it, whether I feel like it or not, because there's so much you don't feel like it. But again, if I tell myself I'm doing it because of that long-term pursuit of happiness, I'm hoping it'll all kind of like mesh together and I will, you know, get to my goals. So that's my theme for the year.
I
Okay.
dig
Okay.
that.
I
I
like
dig
that.
that.
I
Yeah.
actually been hearing that message from like a lot of these motivational coaches, like I've been seeing online. You know, I actually been following along on that same kind of regimen, I guess myself, recently. I heard someone say something real similar, so I've been kind of like using that as like my motivation. It's just been more so not get caught up in the no, like as soon as I feel like I might not want to do it, or I could probably pick that off. That's when I gotta really just kind of buckle down and do it. Like then I got no choice. Like I'm like let that thought creep my head. So now I gotta do it. Like just to kind of stay up on myself and hold myself accountable. It's been and it does work. I will say that. Like on the days like I haven't really held myself accountable, it's like nagged me so much that the next day I've almost doubled what I've had to say I had to didn't do. I'm getting tongue tied. I'm doubling what I said I didn't do the prior day because of the pressure I set on myself from not doing it. So like for me, working out has been like a big thing. Like the last couple months, I've been making it more of a key within my my routine to get a workout in, even when I'm tired. Like especially when I'm tired, to be like, all right, let me do like at least 20 to 30 minutes of something. Whether that's arm curls or stretching or just simple push-ups for the 30 minutes, like just do something, So like for me, it's been good and it's been bad at the same time. It's been bad because like some days like I really don't feel like doing it. Like and I'm really like telling myself, oh I gotta just push through it. Like even when I'm doing it, I'm like having the doubts. I'm like, do I really need to do this? Like who is this for but me? But like that's really like the benefit because like at the when I'm done, like I'm like glad that I persevered through it. I'm like, the way I feel like physically and spiritually, just like, what? Let me do another round so that motivates me even more.
Right.
So like that's the motivation in itself. So like
Yeah.
like
A lot of times. Oh no, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, yeah, a lot of times, like when you start, you realize you want to keep going with it. It's really just that starting point, and that's where, like, for me, that countdown works because it takes, like I said, your brain literally I don't know if I want to do it. Your brain is designed to protect you. Your brain is designed to take the easiest road out, and it's why a lot of people don't change a lot and don't have a lot of growth. It's not because they're incapable. It's because you have to make the active choice, and then you have to, like, go past what feels comfortable because that's where growth happens. But, like, it doesn't feel comfortable, so who wants to do it? And it's also why people don't change for long periods of time because you have to keep that going. But I've learned if you take it sort of out of your hands and just make it a thing you do, whether you feel like it or not, then it becomes, like that habit, that motion, that thing that keeps you going. And that's why it's also important, like you mentioned, to put in time for rest as well, because you also want to give your body and your mind some grace. Like sometimes it's okay if you don't get everything on your list done, and you don't need to like punish yourself for not doing everything. So finding the balance between not punishing yourself but also not giving yourself a bunch of excuses for slacking is a hard balance to find. It's like weekly. It's what my therapist and I talk about. Well, we're back to every other week now because I'm not on the brink anymore. But like, we have a lot of conversations about it. Thank you. We have a lot of conversations about it because that's the hard part for me, because it's like, and even, when we talk about mental health and mental illness, like even though I know that I have anxiety and I know I have depression, like clinical depression, like went through 3 hours of testing, like I could not fake it if I wanted to, have been diagnosed with depression, I will still in my mind be like, you're just being a slacker. You just don't want to do it. Stop being a punk. Even though I know that it's not that. I know that I'm like at a spot where like I have like the mental roadblocks and where I'm really living through my depression. It's hard, especially if you're a driven person, to find like to resonate and give yourself that grace. The nice thing is though that like when I am back, like right now I'm back on all cylinders as myself, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. Like I can think of a million things and I can do a bunch of things. And that was the depression that was making me feel like I was crawling through thick sand. But it's hard when you're in it to give yourself that grace, which is why it's important to remember whether you're going through something that it is temporary, even though it feels hard. But then also to put in that time for rest, to give yourself that recover time so you're not constantly beating down on yourself to do more and to be more and have more. Like, know that rest is just as important.
Now,
Okay.
Nimade, I'm
Oh,
sorry, my
no,
bad.
go ahead.
So, Nimade, for all of our listeners right now, as well as for Dash and myself, you know, when you find yourself in those spaces where your mind seems to be your worst enemy, how do you navigate that space to end up where you are currently as far as all cylinders being on go and you're much more on an efficient playing field? What are any tricks of the trades, if you will? What are things that you have to remember? What are any little, tidbits or pieces of advice that you give to yourself as far as, my own mind is working against me, but here's what I could do to get to the next day?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a bunch of things. Like the first thing to remember is that it's different for everybody, and also remember that it's also different whether you're dealing with a situational issue or whether you're dealing with something like clinical. So like I live with clinical depression, so I have depression and trigger warning like suicidal ideations like all the time. So like even my baseline happiness is like a couple steps below everyone else's, where I'm kind of like, I'm happy, but I could not be here. And that's something that's hard to live with, and I work through it. But I also go through times where like I am like in my depression, where it's like I'll either say I'm like having an episode because it's pulling me down, or I will go through what everyone else goes through, which is like a situational depression. Like something happened, you lost someone, you lost a job, something changed in your life, and so for a period of time, you're really feeling down. Those are hard to navigate, but also in some ways a little bit easier, because time is going to be the thing that helps you the most with those. The time that it takes to get over whatever is happening in your life that's making you sad. But while you're dealing with those, you still have to try to work through it. First thing is to give yourself grace. Like, understand that you're going through something, whether it's a depression episode or whether it's a life thing. Like, you're not the same you that you are when things are going great. And that was a huge thing for me to work with myself, because I want to be that person, right? Like, I want to be the person who can do a bunch of things. And, it's hard when you're someone who's like always has ideas, is able to juggle 5 different things, able to do all this stuff, to go from that to being like, I can barely get out of bed. I don't want to do one damn thing on my list, let alone 10 things on my list. So then I get in that mode, and it feels like on top of the pressure and the sadness of the depression, now I also feel like I'm letting myself down, I'm letting other people down, and now I'm, ripping and roaring on myself mentally. So it's really important when you go through that to talk to yourself the way you would talk to a stranger. Like, I have to actively step out of talking to myself the way I would talk to myself, and say, like, if I was having this conversation with someone who told me they were feeling all the things I'm feeling, what would I say to them? Because I'm a very kind person to other people. It took me a while to realize I'm not that kind to myself. So I really have to, when I'm in those moments, say, like, would you tell someone else they're being a slacker? Would you tell someone else who feels as bad as you do that they should just deal with it and move on? Or would you tell them to give themselves some grace? Would you tell them to do one thing at a time? And so however I would talk to other people is how I make sure to talk to myself during that time. And also setting little attainable things for me, because I am someone who's normally like, I don't want to say like high achieving. Like, I normally do a bunch of things. I get down on myself for not doing things, but I do try to set like one thing that I do each day. And it depends on how down you get. Like, I really get to the point where I don't want to do anything. Like, and it's hard to explain that to people who don't have that level of depression, where it's like just existing feels exhausting. So doing anything on top of that feels like it's just so much, Yeah, so when I'm in that, it's hard, but I do try to set like at least one thing that day I can do where I'm like, okay, I accomplished that thing. Like, I did that one thing. I finished that one task. And sometimes, that's a couple of days like that. This year was especially rough for me because I dealt with so much loss and sickness and work stuff, that it was like months and months of it, to the point where like by July, I felt like I was just drowning and ready to kind of, end it all, which is part of why we, are having this conversation because of what happened with Twitch and because of my video explaining to everybody how that felt for me. But it really was. It felt like just months of drowning, and that even that trying to do one thing to exist, I was like, I'm over it. Like if this is living, I just don't want to be here anymore because it's so hard, Luckily, I was able to still push through it. I was almost at the point of getting help, getting admitted, and that's something that you have to keep an eye on for yourself as well. I've dealt with mine long enough to know where it's first I started, because I'm big on therapy and going to therapy and having a therapist, but I normally, when I'm doing fine, it's more of like a check-in thing, like every other week, the psychologist, like every couple months. But like this year and for most of the year, I was like therapist every week. At some point, she was like, do we need to go twice a week? I was like, we might need to, but my wallet can't, so we're good on once a week. But, so it was like, but I was like every week with the therapist and every couple of weeks with the psychologist figuring out medications and stuff. And so you just have to, that's where that self-awareness is important, for you also to know what your baseline is, because your baseline might be different than other people's baseline. So if you look, like, even if you look at my page, my IG page, you would never know that this was like one of the toughest years of my life. Like in June, I was doing like a ton of lives. In March, I was doing a ton of lives, but like there were days where that was the only thing I did that day. There were days where I was like in bed and I was like, you just got to get through 30 minutes. You just got to get through this 30-minute live and you can do it. And that was the only thing I was able to do that entire day. But if you look at my page, you're like, hey guys, I'm smiling. And it's not about projecting a fakeness. It's about doing what I needed to do to get through it, And so you can't really go based off of what you see other people dealing with or smiling or getting along, because you don't know if that 5 minutes you're seeing them is the only 5 minutes they're okay that entire day. Or if like that one little thing that happens that sets them off, it might have been a buildup and it was just this one tiny thing. Like I had that happen last year. I spilled some water and like broke down sobbing. It was like, you just spilled a cup of water, but that cup of water was like the tip of the iceberg of like everything. So giving that, and when you start to extend grace to yourself, it also makes it easier to extend it to other people. Like, because I'm aware of the times where like I'm smiling but going through hell, and because I'm aware of the times where like I'm having a meltdown over something little, but it's because of other things, that when I see other people, it allows me the ability to pause and be like, maybe this is that straw that broke that camel's back, or maybe that person is smiling, but they're going through hell. So it's just like, it's easier to be compassionate to other people.
That interestingly sounds like a gift within the curse. You know what I mean? I don't want to glorify, what is a real issue, but for those navigating it to be at the space where you currently are and to empathize with it, it seems that it can be of great help to others who are going through similar or somewhere in the realm of whatever mental health issue that they're dealing with as well.
Yeah, and it's hard too because there are so many people within our community that are affected. Like, where the Black community in itself is like 20 times more likely to have mental health struggles, but like only 5% of us will get help, unlike 40% of white people, because of the stigma of it. We're like, pray it away. Those are white people problems. They're blah, blah, blah. But it's like, no, we all have brains, and we all have like we all have a physical health. We all have a mental health. And, part of it is stigma. Part of it is lack of resources and finding people who look like you, because that does matter, right? If you want to say, see a therapist, but then, you're Jeide trying to see Jameson, like with his glasses on, and he's like, you're like, you don't understand what I'm talking about, like it makes it hard to open up to someone if they're not relating to you. So it's and I'm glad that there's more people coming out and like trying to do therapy and coming out and being relatable to us, because unfortunately, as with everything is so rooted in white supremacy that you even have like the books that therapists use to diagnose people with mental illnesses. It doesn't take in consideration certain things that are just blatantly different for the Black community, right? So it's why Black men have a higher number of getting diagnosed with schizophrenia. It's not because they necessarily have more schizophrenia. It's because there are certain things within like our characteristics and within like even like blinking and like the heart rates, and there's books you can read on it, but that stuff isn't taken into consideration that our numbers are just naturally different than white people's numbers. So if you put our checklist with theirs, then yeah, there's something wrong, but it's not always that.
Mm.
Yeah, you telling the truth.
One, go ahead, Dash. Go ahead, because yeah, it was gonna go somewhere really, really, really deep, really deep.
We
Go
like
ahead,
deep.
Dash.
What was your question?
Yeah.
Oh Lord, okay, here we go. Only if you're comfortable with asking, with answering this question, and if not, please. You already know it's all love still. But you said that you were clinically diagnosed as far as your anxiety and your depression. Was there at any point in time that your diagnosis came from somebody that was not of the same color, or did you feel that you needed to go specifically to somebody of the same color in order for you to really adhere to the diagnosis?
No, actually, for that diagnosis, it was someone who was white. That's just who the therapist was. Because I've known about it since I was a teenager. That was actually, well, we officially found out about it with my first attempt to take my life when I was 13. And when that happened, I ended up like in a coma, and it was this whole thing. But then I had to see a therapist. And before that, I hadn't been to a therapist because we're Black, we're African, we don't see therapists.
Right.
I couldn't explain to my mom why I seemed fine. And, just like now, I was high functioning back then too. I was getting the great grades, presidents of all the clubs, doing all the church things, like teaching Sunday school, like all cylinders on go, and crying myself to sleep every night, So, but no one was seeing that side, and I didn't want anyone to see that side. And mental health wasn't talked about as much. So I just thought it was just me. Like there's just something wrong with me that I was so sad. And I wasn't talking about that depression. So then when I was going through that, when I got to that same stage, was kind of where I got this year, which was like I just can't do this anymore. I don't want to be here anymore. That's when I had my first attempt, and that's when I started to see a therapist. That was the first time I was first just diagnosed with SAD, seasonal affective disorder, which is when you get like the winter blues, as people say, but it's a little bit more than that because everyone kind of gets a little bit down in the winter. And that's the thing, too, is a lot of people, because those of us who suffer from clinical and diagnosed mental things, because most people kind of suffer from a little surface level, little blips of it, it's hard for them to understand how much deeper it is for the rest of us. So like because most people feel a little bit down in the winter because there's no sun, they're like, so it's hard for them to really sometimes commiserate with someone who's like, no, like October to February, I was sobbing, like I don't want to move, like, like it's really like this thing. They think like, oh, you're just being dramatic, you're just being sensitive, but it really does affect people on different levels. So that's when I knew I had SAD, and then I sort of try to navigate it through the years, like on my own. I would do medication, and then I get off medication. Once I felt better, I finally had to get to the point where I'm like, okay, we need that medication. But as far as like the diagnosis, the only reason I did the formal testing, because your therapist will tell you, and your psychologist will tell you, but it was for a work. I needed some time off of work. So there's actually like actual testing they can put you through. And it is like a series, like you have to answer questions, and you have to like do blocks, and there's all this stuff. It's also an IQ test too. Or they can tell you like where you are in the IQ thing as well with it. But it's set up so that you can't fake it. Because there are people who fake it. But because of the way the questions are asked, and they'll be asked one way in this part of the test and a different way in another part of the test, like you can't fake it based on how it's asked. Which for someone like me who thinks I should be able to just think myself better, like it's actually been beneficial for me to have that. Like, I don't know. It's like, I know I'm not faking it, but I also feel like, girl, suck it up. Like, really? You can't just suck it up and be better? So now I have like the background of like, no, I actually have this clinical thing. And it's because we're in a society that so much doesn't give a lot of weight to that we all feel like we should just be able to think ourselves better and magically feel better, and it's just not that. And so it's hard, like, going back to, like, no, this is an actual thing. And that's why I always try to tell people, like, no, remember that your brain is the organ. So, like, even for me not wanting to take medication, I would start, and then I'd be like, no, I got this, I'm good, I don't need this. And it took a few rounds of, like, getting on the medication, feeling better, getting off the medication, for me to finally be like, listen, I have asthma. I'm never like, oh, well, I'm just going to breathe those lungs healthy. Like, we're just going to think real hard, and suddenly my lungs will work the way they're supposed to. Like, it doesn't work that way. So why I think my brain should work that way when I know that my brain isn't producing a specific chemical that I need, like, so why I think my brain should magically be able to do it, where I wouldn't have any other organ be like, you should just figure it out. It was like, okay, snap out of it. So, and being more regimented with taking that medication has helped. And that's not to say everyone needs it, because again, it depends if it's a clinical thing, or if it's a situational thing. If it's more situational, you're able to, like, do all those, like, life practices, some, like, negative thought thinking or positive thinking, reframing your mind frame, meditating, all of those things, which I still need to incorporate even with the medication to make it work. But you're less likely to need medication if it's not at that clinical level. But people also need to know that it's okay if it's at that clinical level to get on the medication, because there's no amount of meditating and ohms that are going to produce a chemical that you're just not producing.
Thanks. I know. But like you said, I do suggest getting a doctor to learn it before taking the medication, because I'm glad you've been so open with us, Namadi, because as you were talking and you were sharing your stories about what you were dealing with throughout this year, it kind of just started to shine light on me and a little bit of what I was dealing with this year. And you said something about earlier when you were just like how you was doing the lives, and you would get up to do the lives, and then afterwards you would just kind of fall back into your depression. And I remember, like, vividly, I was going through the same stuff myself, like when we was doing PVM, where it was just like I get up for the live. After the live, I'm not really feeling the best, or I'm not really feeling the best about myself, where I'm questioning myself, And I did think for a while, like, maybe I did need medication, or maybe I need this to kind of get my mind right, like, and I did have my therapist work with me and kind of like give me like different things, like as far as like trying to do yoga, meditation. Right now I'm trying to get into boxing more, because for me it's a physical thing. Like when I'm physical and I'm exuding some energy, like I feel less depressive. I feel more energetic, and I'm able to really tap into who am I, without, feeling like I'm being super aggressive just because I'm expressing myself through an aggressive nature. So, like, it was just like little tactics like that where I was just like, like being a man, like I kind of, even the idea of therapy, for a while was just like something I just didn't want to broach because I was embarrassed, and it was just like, like being black, being a man, honestly, being from my family, like it's not something that's normally talked about as far as like, yo, go to therapy. It's more something like we kind of laughed about in the past, where it's just I'm like, oh, you need therapy. So now it's just like hindsight being one being like, yo, I'm in therapy, and even I had a couple conversations this past Christmas with a couple of my relatives that didn't even know I was in therapy, and just the shock and their faces, and I can even hear it in their tones of like, oh, you're in therapy, like, and I can hear like the hint of judgment, but the need to not trying to judge, but at the same time, our nature is to judge. So it's just like, oh, like what's going on with you? Like it's just like, it's weird, but it's just like, yeah, like, like I'm not all there, like, or I am all there, like, but I just kind of need somebody to help me navigate this route, and that's okay, like, and I think like as we like have these conversations and make it more comfortable, like people do feel the need, and it's you feel more open and willing to try to do something when you've seen people that and trust done it, and they telling you about the work that it's helped and how it's been beneficial to them, because I know from me personally, until I actually heard like people I really, really rock with talk about some of their therapy sessions and some how it was beneficial to them, and I can actually see it myself, like it was beneficial to them. That's what motivated me to do therapy. It wasn't like I was just like one day like, you know, I'm just so messed up. Let me go get it. It was just like, nah, like I know I'm messed up, but like I'm gonna keep on trying to thug it out on my own. Like,
Yeah. Well, I think it's like it's so, and I really commend you for being open and honest with it, because there is such a stigma still about going to therapy. And honestly, if anyone really needs it, it's you Black men. And I don't even mean that necessarily in a like, oh, you men need therapy. I mean, like, you deal with a lot. Like, every day, every time you walk out of your house, you deal with so much just by being a Black man in America. You know what I mean? So take on your natural emotions and feelings and take on the world and then add family to that. Like, it's a lot. And for people to be like, oh, well, just deal with it, just tough it up because you're a man. Like, there's a reason why depression rates are so high amongst men and amongst Black people. And there's a reason why suicide rates are high as well. The difference is that we're just not talking about it, because you have, like, in our group, like 85% of the people think that you should be able to just deal with it with religion, just like pray it away. And then so then you have the guilt of like, oh, like why? Yeah. But the truth is, like, yes, you can pray, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you need to have tools. And that's, for me, what I always try to remind people about therapists. A lot of people think, like, I don't need someone to tell me about myself. I don't need to just sit and tell someone my business. And it's like, it's not about that. First of all, a good therapist is spending half the time asking you questions. So they're getting you to think about how you think about your life, and they know the questions to draw out of you. And then more so than that is they know the tools, because I can vent to pretty much anybody about what's going on in my life and what's rough. I can look up YouTube videos and things like that. But, like, will they know how to tell me how to redirect my mind? Like, when when thoughts pop up, if they're intrusive, and how to, like, stop and redirect, and just things that I've learned from my therapist over time. I mean, thankfully now there is so much, like, on YouTube and TikTok and things like that. You can find actual therapists and things to follow to learn those tools, because resources are hard to get sometimes, insurance, all of that. So until you can go to a specific therapist, there are ways to look into it. But I think it's so important, not even I think, I know it's so important for people to talk out about the experience. And it hasn't always been comfortable to me. It's still not comfortable to me, even making my video about, my suicidal ideations, like, my first attempt was when I was 13. It took me until my 30s to even, like, say the word, to even admit that I'd ever tried, because I was so embarrassed. Like, there's a level of, like, embarrassment, like, oh, really? Because we hear it when someone passes away. Oh, they're so weak. Oh, they're so selfish. Oh, they're so this. And it's like, well, no, I was dying, like, literally, like, mentally feeling that way. And I just was, done, because it was so exhausting. And if you've never been there, you don't understand. But the truth is that if nobody speaks about it, nobody will ever understand. And that's kind of when I started talking out about it more. Social media gets a lot of flack, as it deserves in some cases. But in other cases, it's great because it lets you connect with people who think like you do, or who, like, look like you do, and who are going through things. And so I've found over the years that the more that I'm willing to be open about certain things I go through, there's usually somebody else who's like, oh, thank goodness, I'm not alone with this. And B, it makes me feel good, because I'm like, hey, I'm not alone with this. Like, there are other people dealing with this. Even this year, one of the things I talked about, like, I hurt myself. I snapped both of my ankles, the one's in December, the other one in March. And so, like, between that and being sick and all that, like, I developed, like, a little bit of agoraphobia. Like, it was really, like, I was having full-blown panic attacks trying to leave my house. Like, I've always had a little bit of social anxiety, but I could be like, suck it up and go. But, like, this was, like, heart pounding, sweating, crying, like, I can't walk out my door. And that was embarrassing as fuck to me, to be honest. Like, really? You're, like, 35 and you're crying because you don't want to walk out your front door? What is that? And so there was, like, a level of shame. I didn't want to talk about it. I was dealing with my therapist. And then I finally slowly started opening up about it, like, in my stories. And so many people were like, me too. Me too. Like, since the pandemic, I've been scared to leave too. I have panic attacks too. And I'm like, oh, okay. And it made me feel better in the sense of like, oh, okay, I'm not alone, but also made me feel better and like, I'm glad that they know they're not alone, because here I was struggling with it because no one else is talking about it. And like, you just sort of have to realize, not that I think I'm here to light the way for everyone, but you have to realize that sometimes you have to be the person that speaks up on it,
Yeah.
on a topic, for other people to speak up on it. And I find usually the topics I'm most scared to talk about are the topics that other people are
People
sitting in
relate
their
to the
fear to
most.
talk
Yeah.
about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, you talking, especially as like, you know, you have your job, you have your family. So for you to be like, hey, I'm going to therapy, and to not be worried about the opinions of other, I mean, you're human. So a little part of you is going to be like, man, I'm worried what they'll think about me going to therapy. But like, you
Yeah,
don't know even those people with their judgments who are thinking like, man, maybe I should try. Or maybe like, hey, if Dash is doing it, or Jeide or Nimade is doing it, like maybe, you know, I can too. And for me, because I do want to be seen as like this person who has like my shit together and does the things and blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, do I want to reveal this weakness? But honestly, it's all about how you view it. And what I've learned is most of the things I think are like, oh, do I want to share this weakness, are in fact something that's like, hey, you're badass because you got through that. Like,
Yep.
yeah,
like, okay, yeah, you had panic attacks trying to leave the house, but guess what? You still did it.
Mm-hmm.
So are you weak because you had it, or are you strong because you got through it? You know,
Mm-hmm.
you had this year that was hell, and it was hard to get up for even one thing that day, but you got up for one thing that day. So are you weak or are you strong? You know, so it's really all about how you see it for yourself, and also then influences how other people see it. So if you present it as like, oh, I'm so weak because I'm going to therapy, they're going to see it like that too. But if you're like, hey, I'm trying to be a better person, I'm trying to have growth, I'm trying to do all these things, and this is a tool that's available to help me, and I'm using it, then that will be how they see it too. Even if they don't say it, even if they don't acknowledge it in that moment, because sometimes you're the person planting the seed, and sometimes you're the person giving water to the seed, and you never know where you are, what in someone else's journey. But if you keep speaking your truth, you're impacting them in some way.
Mm-hmm.
that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well said. Well said. Well said. So I know we're coming up on an hour real soon with this conversation.
Time
Unfortunately,
flies with
this
you guys.
is,
Sorry,
I
I
know,
got my.
right?
No,
I,
no,
even
I
though I
know,
talk
no.
so
right?
much, I'm so used to the one doing the interview that like when someone gives me space to be interviewed, I'm like, I have things to say.
And we're happy and we're glad and we are completely grateful for the fact that you have so much to say on this. This is an extremely important topic, not only to our community, but just to humanity at large, because so many of us deal with whatever voices, whatever circumstances, whatever ills of life, you know what I mean, that we have to deal with day by day, that we deal with, that we feel like we're dealing with by ourselves, you know. We may have partners, we will have families, we'll have friends, but not all the times we take it upon ourselves to share these experiences and these instances with the people that are around us because of whatever reason. Perhaps you may feel that, you know, somebody don't get it. Perhaps you might just feel self-conscious yourself about what you're going through or whatnot. So it's extremely imperative for individuals and minds like yourself, Nimade, to come out and be the representation for those that may be hiding, you know what I'm saying, behind their own rock, and let them know, look, it's okay. You know, come on out. You're not the only one that's going through this. You're not the only one that's experiencing what you're experiencing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be what you are dealing with, but
hmm
it's enough that you come out with your testimony to allow other
hmm
people to say, you know what, okay, you know, if this could work for her, whatever the case, you know what I mean? Whether
Yep.
it's therapy, whether it's the tools that you learn from therapy, whether it's even what you said just about, you know, just reaffirming to yourself that, you know, you are worthy, you have value, you know what I mean? Just these certain things that we have to remind ourselves so much regarding, you know, going out and allowing the external world to be so much a part of our life that sometimes we absorb way more than we need to, you know?
hmm Yep. Yep.
So true.
Absolutely.
And also to be patient with the process too. I will say, I will speak about like my process early on because like for me, like opening up was hard, and I did need like a therapist of my color, to relate to. And even in that process, that's difficult because right now the therapist I've been with her for about like 3 weeks now. I feel like I'm just kind of starting to get comfortable with her. But before that, I had about like 4 to 5 therapists I kind of was dibbling dabbling with, just to
Which,
kind
by
of.
the way, I love that because people don't realize that, like, it's okay to shop a therapist. Like, you need to go through, like, maybe give them 1 or 2 sessions. And if you're not clicking, move to the next. You don't have to stay with someone that you don't work with, and you shouldn't give up therapy just because that therapist doesn't work for you. So I
Yeah.
love that you've been finding the person that works.
Oh no, that's essential because and that's also where I wanted to lead the people with, because like for me, like I was thinking about giving up early, and I was getting frustrated in that process because um at first it was the race thing. They couldn't relate to me because he was white, I was black. Then it was I found someone black, but she was a lady, and she couldn't. I well, she had a hard time, giving me real perspective, from a man's perspective, being from a lady, and just our ideology just wasn't matching, although our skin color was matching, so like you just kind of got to find somebody that's going to sit right with you, that's going to help you get through the process, whatever you seeking, and you'll know when it feel right or when it doesn't feel right,
Yeah.
within the first couple questions of this therapist I have now. I started to feel like a comfortability where I was just like, you know what, okay, like I might not trust her every movement, but I'm comfortable enough with her to at least allow her to do what she want to do, and just trust
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. That's important.
Well,
It
and that's
is.
all I got to say to wrap up.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you guys so much for having me. The topic of mental health is one that's always big on me because it's been my struggle. And like I said, it wasn't really until I started speaking up about it that I realized how many other people were dealing with it as well. And so my main thing is not just to let other people know that they relate to me, but to help encourage them to speak and use their voice, because we all have different life things. And just know that there are resources. NAMI.org is a big one. I'm in Delaware, so I use NAMIDelaware.org. I'm the diversity and equity fellow with them, so I'm always trying to like reach out to our community in particular. But there's help and there's resources out there. There's classes you can take. There's support groups, all different things available to you. You just have to reach out and find it.
All right.
I like
All
that.
right. All right.
I like that.
Yes, yes. Well, for everybody who has been in the comment section listening, we appreciate your presence. Jeide, always welcome. Thank you, as
Thank you.
always, for being so honest, for being so open. We appreciate you. We send our flowers to you, and we love you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Thank
Peace,
you.
peace.
And Happy New Year to everybody.
And
You
Happy
too.
New Year. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank y'all for tapping into a new episode of PVM. We'll see you guys next Sunday, 7 p.m. Until then, stay loved up, stay prayed up, stay blessed up. It's your loved ones. Appreciate the time you spend with them, and make sure that you cherish each moment just like it's your last.
Yes,
We'll see
sir.
y'all later.
Peace.